Hey everybody, good afternoon. It's Doom here from Dungeons and Doom Biscuit. And this is a Deep Gnome Ranger by Reaper Bones. I actually think I had this in metal before my house fire. But basically, I need an NPC bad guy for a fight. And the NPC, his name is Tiny Tim. He's a wee folk, which in my system, kind of like gnomes and halflings, they're all kind of bundled in as wee folk, and like Nerve Nebulin and everything else, subtypes of those, and are all just different types of wee folk. I didn't see the need for enormous stat change for all these different races, so I combined a lot of stuff and made my system a little more streamlined for play, and it seems to be pretty effective. But wee folk are essentially the size of a gnome or a halfling, somewhere in there. They're small, size small. So I have this miniature, and I'm going to paint it up, and he's going to be a bad guy called Tiny Tim that they have accepted a bounty to go get. So let's start with that. So the first thing I'm going to do, let's get a little tape. Play it on the cardboard right yet. I use that cardboard to dry brush it in white. Okay. This is my disposable low-profile palette. I'm going to start with a little bit of this barbarian flesh. I want him to look a little bit ridiculous. So this guy has no hair, and he was perfect for what I needed, and he looks a little wonky and bonky. What I wanted was somebody who looks like they've been burnt. So he's going to be good for that. In my head for 2 days, at least 2 days, I've had the song Hey Louie by RC Drive just living rent-free in my mind. The young guy that sings it has this very, like, I don't know if it's deliberate or if it's just his natural voice, but he's got this very, like, Bob Dylan-esque kind of sound. And when I first heard it, I was like, wow, this is really good. And I went and searched it up and found it, and I can't quit listening to it. It's super good. Now, on a first glance, I think the only flesh on the miniature was his head. The rest of them should all be clothing. And that should do pretty good for what we needed. All right, let's do his cloak next. For his cloak, I'm going to use this dark stone color. It's like a gray-brown. This guy's kind of a bandit king, in a way. He has a magic item that allows him to get away with the shit that he does. And that magic item is a scroll that he stole from a hapless wanderer. Or maybe he was given it. No one really knows exactly where Tiny Tim got the scroll. The story he tells is that he stole it from a powerful wizard. But the problem is, before he got the scroll, anybody that knew Tiny Tim knew he was kind of a shiesty skunk. He wasn't somebody that would get in your face and fight. So, Tiny Tim's scroll is this magical reusable scroll that actually only works for wee folk for some reason. It's written in common, so anybody can read it and see what it says, and it just says silly gibberish things like little jokes and limericks. But if a wee folk reads it, it activates a spell on them. That spell does several cool things that are going to make the fight interesting. The first thing it does is it makes a piece of paper float around them And they can summon it every turn. If it gets destroyed, they can just resummon it at will, as long as they can speak. And that paper says all this silly stuff, but what it does is it creates a 50% chance to block any physical damage, and it'll hit the paper instead. The paper will jump in front of the attack and absorb it with a 50% chance of success. Gotta get this percentile dice and exercise. The second thing it does affects his attacks, his melee attacks only. If he attacks you with a melee weapon and it hits, you have a 50% chance of being knocked prone. It's an agility or dexterity based save depending on the system you're using, or reflex if you're using 3-5. And that save will stop you from getting knocked prone. The other 50%, if you don't get knocked prone, is that you get knocked back 1d6 times 5 feet. So he's going to try to set up a fight in a place like in a cave or in a building or somewhere, or in trees, where he can try to hit you, and if it knocks you back, it's going to send you flying into trees. That's what he's going to want to try to do. Let's do his little shirt. It's called Pure Red. I don't know if I've used it. No, it's brand new. I've never used it. Sometimes when you first open these for the first time, there's like a little bit of a weirdness when you spray it out if you don't have it mixed well. Just make sure you have it mixed well with these. Oh, I said that his scroll did 3 things. The interesting third thing that it does he's going to look good. Real good. Is once every 1d4 turns, Tiny Tim's magic scroll lets him teleport 50 feet or 10 inches. So this is a very broken item. And I will tell you this. If you have a mongrel folk, they have a 10% chance of being able to use the scroll. Based off of that roll, it'll determine if there's enough of them that's wee folk to... Well, I'm not sure what the official rules on mongrel folk are. In my world, they're essentially all the races of humanoids have bred enough, and they eventually made this race called mongrel folk. They're very rare. Often there's some fey lineage in the blood that has created this phenomenon. Now for his little skirt thing there, we're going to use this desert yellow. Now, the real truth about where he got this item, like I said, is unknown. But it might be fun to include in your lore if they find out the truth and they research it after they've dealt with them or whatever. Is that it was actually given to him by a mischief god. A mischief god who thought, for whatever reason, that Tiny Tim could be reformed, and that if he changed his stars and gave him an opportunity to do better, he would. But that's not what happened. Not at all. Let's get a light brown color called Monster Brown to do those boots and gloves. Little boots. So, oftentimes your story kind of trends to take these weird tones about real life events and historic times and political situations. And I am no different. I am susceptible to accidentally designing stories that have parallels to reality in some form. So you can draw whatever conclusions you wish as I tell you what's going on with Tiny Tim, how he got sent down the path of evil. For many, many centuries, there has been peace in the land amongst the humanoid races. This includes the animal type races like dog people and cat people and rabbit people and everybody. There's been a time of tolerance and peace and love and pardon me, holy crap, sneezed my face off. Well, the newest, youngest king, who's probably, past his prime, has remarried. And he's remarried a barbarian princess from the plains who is a fierce racist. Her racism stems predominantly towards wee folk. So wee folk had come as a gypsy group to her tribe's camp, and they were putting on shows and entertaining them, and they were gypsies, so there were some shenanigans they were trying to see what they could get out of the people, because they're gypsies. And in the middle of the night, the king of the plainsmen, his daughter, awakens to the smell of fire. The halflings, or not halflings, the wee folk are gone. And many of our people are dead. And the camp, all their structures have been lit afire. She blamed the wee folk. She eventually, even though her father was the king of the plains people, they answered to the king. The king of the land is the ultimate authority, and all the sub-kings of the different little factions of humans, even though they might not admit it at the time, ultimately kind of have to answer to the king of the humans at the town of Atten, where, the capital is, the castle is, and everything. So she goes there, looking for the king to do something. Now, he's been a tolerant dude. He doesn't care about anybody being different or individuals. He just wants everybody to kind of do their thing. But he's smitten, absolutely smitten, with this beautiful barbarian queen. So as she's asking for legitimate help, his lazy monarchy ass can't stop thinking about how beautiful she is and how his wife had died. And he can't take his eyes off of her. And his lust sets in. And he makes her a deal. He says, if you marry me, we will find these halflings and make them punished. And even though she doesn't like that answer, she doesn't want to live in a castle, and she doesn't want to be the king's essentially concubine as far as she looks at it. She agrees. But when they're unable to find these halflings that she's looking for, she starts pushing him to punish all halflings. And he, in his infinite bonerdom, agrees. And they start kidnapping, having the guards and stuff kidnap halflings for questioning in a hunt to find the bad guy halflings. That, by the way, she has no evidence they were involved, but it seems like, they're involved. And you can decide if they were or were not involved, if they burnt his camp down, her camp down or not, as you're telling this story. If you ever tell it. Because let's be honest, we spend a lot of time coming up with stories, but we don't get to spend a lot of time telling them. Because parties immediately will do the exact opposite of what you plan for. Unless you're a railroader. We're getting there. We have a couple spots where we haven't put any paint yet, though. So, Tiny Tim is a victim of this. About 6 months ago, maybe a year ago, no good Tiny Tim gets caught stealing a town and thrown into the dungeon. Atten, the capital. He's a petty thief. Kind of a conniving, backstabbing little lurch. And when he's in jail, the queen has a guy named Dolph. Dolph is a mountain tribe barbarian that worked for the king, who kind of does her bidding. And he goes down to the jail and interrogates halflings looking for information. And somehow in the torture process, fire began. And because he had, the halflings had supposedly killed her tribe with fire, Dolph decided it would be just to burn this halfling who he thought knew something. And even though he did burn him and things were terrible, Tiny Tim managed to escape during the situation. And shortly thereafter found the scroll and then kind of became a minor bandit king of sorts. It's off-white. Oops. All right, let's get this base going. If you don't mind, I'm sorry, I sneezed and I need to blow my nose. I'm sorry about that. I was trying not to because I think it's rude to do on a video, but I just have to. I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you for putting up with my grossness. So this paint is just apple barrel from Walmart. Burnt umber. I use this on all my bases. I really like it a lot. In real life, dirt's usually really dry and light. But for like this fantasy aesthetic I'm always trying to capture, I've decided that Earth is always kind of rich and fresh. Because you're still in a fantasy aesthetic. I call it fantasy realism. The world's more vivid. It's more alive than the real world. That's why it's fantastical. Fantastical is not a word I don't believe. I probably wouldn't go touting that around like it is. I think it's just fantastic. And I'm a bit of a dumbass. We're going to use that bigger brush we just had. I'm going to dry it off with my, I have a cloth sitting here. I'm going to get some of that lighter brown. I'm going to wipe a lot of that off my brush. And I'm just going to kind of hit some of these 3D bumps on this texturized portion of his original base. And I'm going to come around here onto that dirt and just kind of carry that down a little bit to give it some variation and make it a little more interesting. I'm going to wash that brush out and get black. I'm going to come around and paint the outline of this base. Where I don't have any 3D texture. Well, anyways, Tiny Tim hates the king. So instead of running away where it's going to be safe and they can't find him, he stays local to the capital and he starts hitting bandit caravans. The queen, afraid that she's gone too far, allowing Dolph to essentially torture and burn a guy who did nothing, or may have done nothing, is worried the king will be furious. So she does not tell the king that she is aware of the situation. Dolph has told her everything. But she does not say, "Your Highness, my husband, this Tiny Tim, well, we terrorized him and caught him on fire and burned all his hair off and tortured him." No. She keeps her mouth shut. And the king's not overly worried about Tiny Tim at the moment. He's got a lot of problems to worry about. So he got to go. But the Merchants Guild can't let it go. Because this dude and his band of bandits, they're doing some serious damage to trade. Until comes time for tax collection, the king's not going to be overly miffed about this. This color is called blood red. Yeah, we're not ready for that yet, actually. Let's get some of the skeleton bone here. And that little brush we had, that starter brush, let's get some of that flesh color and some of that skeleton bone. Let's get some of this guy's detail with a little variation. I'm worried mostly about the high spots. Okay. Tiny Tim. I wish I could do a squeaky voice, but my vocal cords are still shot, so I will not be able to have a squeaky voice for him tonight. Alright, so we're going to get this blood red. We're going to get the tiniest little dab of that right there, just like that. And this is a speed paint. You can make a wash if you wanted, but I think the speed paint's going to do what I want it to do pretty nicely. Then I'm going to get 2 drops of speed paint medium to thin that out. I'm going to mix that up. And I'm going to wipe that thin. And I'm just going to come over him. I did not mean to get it on his eye. I'll have to repaint that now. I'm using a Q-tip or a piece of cloth or whatever you got. Just come back in. Dab that out. Take some of that off. Restore a little bit of that flesh tone to him. And then let's get that eye painted white again. Or off-white. Now here's the quandary. Tiny Tim was kind of a lowlife that would stab you on the back to get a buck. But he probably didn't deserve to be tortured for that. Creates an issue, a bigger issue that we need to talk about. When the god of mischief, or however he actually got this scroll, gave it to him, there were hopes that there could be some kind of reforming, a reformation, about changing of his ways. Maybe he'd learn a lesson. That was the thought. I lost a brush. And it goes in a certain spot, so it's going to drive me nuts. I'm looking for it now, and I think I saw it. There it is. Sorry, when things aren't where they belong, it irks me. Alright, I'm getting a really small fractional brush here. I'm going to do his pupils. Not pupils, his irises. And that bright blue. And just give him some little eyes. Clean my fractional brush out with my mouse, and then I'm going to hit him with some water. Now you're probably saying, Doom, why can I see so many different layers and depth on him when you just did one coat of paint everywhere? Well, the reason for that is this. When I paint a miniature black, and then I dry brush it white, and then I use thin paint, you tend to be able to see some of the tones that are left over, some of the changes that are left over. And it's a good effect if you want to quickly paint a miniature up and get a good look. You can go through many more steps than that. and you could put a lot more effort in, but I just want something that I can throw on the table and have ready for a fight. So obviously this was the colors I used. I could have used a lot more. I could have done a lot more. I could have done a lot of dry brushing and tone changes, and I didn't do that. He turned out pretty bright and pretty vivid and good, but he's still kind of grimdarky and gross. And, you know, that's just a choice I made this time. But there's some stuff we need to do here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get... Where's my soft tone? Let me get some soft tone. And I'm going to create a little bit of scuzz on him. And to do that, I'm just going to get a crappy plastic brush. I'm going to hit him all around and get his metal and his flesh and his little gloves and everything. Just hit them all. I'm not really focusing on the base, but I am getting in here and doing him up. Just like that. And then in some areas, like the little yellow on his robes, or on his loincloth thing there, I'm just going to dab him and get some of that off. On his face, I'm going to dab him and get a little bit of that off. There we go. Then I want his gloves to be a little brighter. I'm just going to dab those. And this little pouch here. Okay. And that added a lot to the miniature and a ton of depth right off the bat. Gave him some serious variation, makes him look like he's scuzzy and been on the road. There's a little bit too much up here on this. I'm just going to tap that and dab that off. And now he's ready. I'm going to dry him off, clear coat him, and take him up to my table and use him tonight to be Tiny Tim in the battle against the bandits and to collect the bounty. Now, you can scale a guy like this up, a custom fight up and down as much as you need to make it work. And lore, even if you never get to expose it to your party, is fun to create anyways. So when you're making bad guys like this or fights like this, take your time and enjoy it, you know, even though you might never get to tell anybody the story. Maybe one day you're tucking your kids or somebody else's kids in the bed, your boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, or brother or sister's kids, or your own or whoever's, you know, you get to tell them the story of Tiny Tim. So anyways, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell icon, leave a comment, all the algorithm God demands, you know the ones. Stuff that makes the channel grow. Come to the website and buy some miniatures. Not this Reaper miniature, real Dungeon Swag miniatures. And go to the Discord. That'd be sick. We'll see you there. Hey, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.